If you have any questions, just let us know as we go. So this is a family program and it is rated PG. So no profanity or inappropriate behavior will be tolerated in the chat or Q&A. Please use the chat box or the Q&A and keep the questions on topic, so it can be anything about fish at all. And if we can't follow those guidelines, we'll either mute your conversation or unfortunately have to remove you. Here is all of my contact information. My name is Abby Zarnecki, and I am the Angler Education Coordinator for the Southern Region. I am a Nevada native. If you want to follow along, we also have regulations at eregulations.com, and then you just go to Nevada. And so we'll have some stuff in here from that. Also assisting tonight is our moderator, and she'll also be presenting, and that is Michelle Lopez. So what we're going to go over is know before you go, fish in their habitat. So this is all stuff you and a beginner can learn and help each other out. We also have mentors. So let me know if that is something that you're interested in, if you need any other help. So we'll find out where the fish are hiding from us, some bait, tackle, and gear, just the basics, tips to practice your cast, and how to be a responsible recreator. So before you head on out, have a checklist. The Recreation, Boating, and Fishing Foundation helps run takemefishing.org. That is where you can get your fishing license. That's where you can find the checklist. You can find all our Nevada maps. All of our information is through them, actually. So you can find all kinds of information for fishing. And a lot of our seminars are also listed on there with the same information. So then you're going to make sure that anyone 12 and older has a fishing license. That way you're prepared and ready for the water, and that makes you a responsible recreator as well. And you're going to check the fishing regulations and make sure you know the legal limits and what fish can be taken out of waters. So we have a lot of endangered species in the Southwest. So we're going to make sure that we don't remove them from their waters. We're only taking the sport fish out of the waters or invasive species. And to also know limits. So if you're fishing in any of the urban ponds in cities, the limit is 3 total fish, and then 5 trout in the rural waters, and that includes the Colorado River. So on page 28 of the fishing guide is a Nevada map, and all the waters are labeled. It is a lot easier to read on the computer. These are a lot clearer. And we also have the full fold-out guides at the offices, or if you need me to mail you one, I can. So all the waters are labeled. And this is an example of the southern region, which is the one that I help educate. And that includes the mountain springs just along the Sierras, the mountains above Tonopah, Perch Wildlife Management Area. This is Eagle Valley Reservoir, which is part of Spring Valley State Park and Echo Canyon State Park, and then Lake Mead all the way down to Laughlin. And hiding up here is mesquite as well. So we also just created what they're calling an app. It's an application. It is on the internet. But if you type in fish space Nevada, it should come up with a trophy fish map. They're calling it that just because of some of the species in the north, some of the trout regions. where they're limited. But this map was created in GIS, and so it's all outlined and labeled, and all the fish in each water are labeled. So this one is really, really neat. And if you need help guiding this, let us know too. And then in the fishing guide is also each water broken down. So this is the that code that's on the map. The water itself is broken down into streams, lakes, and reservoirs. And where it is on a regular map. So like if you had a US map, you could also use the UTMs. And then also the species of each water are listed in here. Some are not complete lists, so just be wary of that. And if you have any questions, never hesitate to call and ask. And then the code for each fish is down here. So there's an example of some lakes and reservoirs and the species in those reservoirs. And those are great places to take families to catch fish. There's great camping, there's restrooms, there's showers, everything is pretty, and it's in the mountains. It's 3 hours north of Vegas and a couple hours south of Ely.
All right, so we want to, whenever we go fishing, we want to just kind of be aware of our surroundings as we would whenever we're out and about in the wild and whatnot. So we can start off by asking, what is an ecosystem? When we define an ecosystem, it's a little easier if we start small and then move outwards. So in our innermost yellow circle, we have a community, which is a group of different species living together. And if we take a step back, we have the habitat, which is a place where organisms can find food, shelter, and everything it needs to survive. And encompassing both of those are the ecosystem, which is all of the living organisms, which are biotic. The word bio means of life, and the non-living components, abiotic, and those all interact within the area, which is our ecosystem. So we have our biotic and our abiotic factors. And here in Nevada, we have a few different types of freshwater ecosystems, and those include our rivers, lakes, ponds, and streams. And our fishing guide, like Abby mentioned, does a pretty good job at telling us which ones are in our area too. So if you are looking at this picture, what do you think are some biotic and abiotic components? And you can think outside of what we see right away too. There may be some things in the water or in the soil or even in the air. Some abiotic non-living factors could include things like moisture from the air or the wind, those non-living things, while we of course have our biotic factors like the fish and other wildlife, maybe some squirrels, some birds, things like that. So where are the fish? And there are different factors that determine where they live in the water. We have our three abiotic, our non-living factors, which are temperature, sunlight, and oxygen. And then our biotic, or non-living factors, nutrients and food. And just like us, temperature, sunlight, and oxygen sort of dictate where the fish choose to live. No one really permanently lives in Antarctica, where it's freezing cold. Sometimes the sun will be shining for 24 straight hours, or there'll be complete darkness for another 24 hours. The elevation is at 8,000 feet, making it hard to breathe with such low oxygen levels. And these just aren't ideal conditions for us to live in. So us, just like the fish, want to live where we are comfortable. But these are all dependent on the different species of fish and the habitat that they are in. There's different plants, predators, food sources, temperature tolerances, and it also could depend on the season and if they're spawning. And these are good things to think about when you go out fishing and are trying to make your bait look like attractive food to them. If they're spawning, you don't want your bait to look too big, then it might look like a predator and they'll be upset. So keep these 4 factors in mind when you are out fishing, and places like points, coves, channels, beds are all good places to start looking. And we have a pretty good fish species diversity in Nevada, meaning that we have a lot of different types of fish. We have our bluegill sunfish, and we also have largemouth bass, our channel catfish, and our rainbow trout. And the fishing guide that we keep referring back to also shows a bunch of our local species and includes information on identifying them and where they can be found.
All right, so what's most important when we're going out? Thank you, Michelle, is to be comfortable. So we're not going to enjoy ourselves if we're not comfortable. So we're going to make sure everybody that we're with is comfortable. We're also going to have these items ready to go. That way you don't waste a lot of time getting out. So I actually keep my tackle bag full of gear, and it's about this big. I was going to try to find something like a notebook, and it's about 4 tackle boxes high. And that stays in the back of my trunk. And that way, even if my kids need a bunch of stuff, I can still throw their stuff in there too. In the perfect weather months, I'd say fall is a really great time to get out all the time. Because the temperature is perfect, especially October, November, December, before it gets cold in January. And you can even leave a chair and the fishing pole in there because it's not going to get too hot in the car. So that you're comfortable, sometimes you can even keep all your gear in a fishing vest, or like I was saying, a little sling tackle bag. And this picture is, I like it so much because I really do like those sling bags that you can put around your waist. They even have them to where you can crisscross. And it has multiple pockets so you can find everything easily. Also, in a bag like this, you have the side pouches, so you can even get the fanny packs, like I'm wearing one, the fanny packs with the little side pockets, and you can put a nice little multi-tool right in the side of that. Um, Highly recommend multi-tools, especially with kids. That way you don't have to worry about the knife popping out or them messing with that specifically. And when we're fishing, we really just want to make sure that we have a clamp, and I was trying to find mine, a clamp to press down barbs if we need to, or to grab a fish if it's really hard and they have teeth. Also on there, you want to make sure you have nippers or wire cutters, and then that way you can cut the fishing line easily. Yeah, those 2 things, it's really easy to fix or rehook a line if it gets stuck. Also, sunglasses and hats, multiple reasons. Sunglasses, especially if they are polarized, you'll be able to see the water clearer and the fish. And also, it's the glare off of the water can really actually affect your eyes. So then that's another reason to have a hat. And then that way you're protected from the sun, your face doesn't get sunburnt as well. Because if you get sunburnt, it's not going to be that enjoyable the next day. So that may reflect on your trip some more. Also, hats and sunglasses are great at protecting you from getting a hook in your face. So especially if you're fly fishing and you're throwing that line back and forth, or if you're a beginner angler or you're not comfortable with your fishing pole, all of those factors can sometimes get a hook in somebody's face. So when we did, and hopefully again, we do fishing field trips, and we have a lot of kids along the shoreline. We have a classroom for 30 minutes. They reel in their fishing line, and so I have to make sure I'm a few steps back and away from their right arm normally. And I have gotten a couple hooks in my shirt, but luckily I was wearing sunglasses and hats, and so I have been saved by those as well. Also, make sure you have durable equipment that won't break. I say that only because sometimes if it's not a reliable company or you're not familiar with them, it could break easily. I have seen new equipment break, especially out here with our rocks. And if you get a kid that doesn't know his own strength and he's bending up on a fishing pole, this can bend pretty good and bend down for you. I'm trying to bend it a little bit, but it can't fully bend. And then that's when it breaks right here in half and then you can't fish with it. So just make sure that one of the companies that you've heard of would probably be the best, and they're not too expensive. You can get a combo rod and reel and with a casting plug for practicing at home for only $15. And that goes into the practice gear, and you can even make catchable fish in your front yard out of cardboard, which I have made videos on that too. And it's kind of a fun activity for the kids. We have spring break coming up and everything. So I do recommend some plastic casting plugs or bobbers work great, and just cast that out and reel it in. It's also really good if you're not really familiar with your new bait caster or spinning reel and you want to test that out. Bobbers actually have a decent amount of weight to them, especially the bigger ones, and you can cast those out. You're not worried about it getting broken. There's no hook on it to catch on anything, and you can practice in your front yard. So again, takemefishing.org has the how to fish section, and it has that list of gear and tackle that you want to make sure you bring with you. So once you're comfortable, all you really need is a fishing pole with a reel and fishing line. And at the store, the fishing line section can be 2 or 3 aisles, depending on where you go, or the whole back wall at some of them. So what you really are looking for is actually something right like this. This one's called spider wire. It literally has a spider on it. Totally affordable and reliable. So that's one we've always used out here. Also, there's Cajun line, and this one's tinted green. You can kind of see it in the light there. And with all of our water being kind of green, it blends in actually better than the clear monofilament because of that white glare. It actually shines a little bit more in the water. This one's kind of heavy at 10 pounds, but this would be really good for Lake Mead because it's a little stronger and stripers have teeth. So if you're going after that striped bass, you may want something a little stronger. But in the urban ponds, you could do a fishing line that's only 4-pound weight because the fish are usually only 1 or 2 pounds. Even the big bass are maybe 3 pounds. And as long as you don't fully bend that rod and reel up, you're going to be really good off. So you don't need any of this 20-pound test unless you're going after the monster stripers down the river. And so this is my tackle gear. This is what I carry on the shoreline when we do the fishing groups and fishing clinics. And this is just a nice little pocket multi-tool. And you can see it has the pliers right here on the end, and it has the wire cutters. I have a couple weights so that the bait is off the bottom. Your bait will usually float up, so you want the weight on the line to let the bait float up just above it. That goes for catfish, bluegill, and trout. And then red hooks are awesome because it's enticing. Having that red is kind of similar to blood, unfortunately. Hard to say. But some guys have actually taken these little red hooks just up to the mountains and been able to catch fish without having to put anything on it at all. So then I put a few different sized hooks in here. These are probably size 10 or 8 hooks. And then these are 1 or 2s. And then also some split shot are in this other container here. So the question is, what conditions would you want to use a clear line versus green line? I will actually go back to the beginning, and it shows a trout in a stream with that really clear water. So a river, not Lake Mead though, but a clear mountain stream, the Truckee pretty clear. I would go with a clear line for that, definitely. And I do use the 4-weight test that I do use. I do use a clear line at the urban ponds where they use the blue-green treatment, and that's to keep the weeds down. That actually blends in really good too, and it's light enough. So if you don't have a heavy power or heavy weight line, um, th- that clear isn't going to be too bad either. But once you get the thicker lines, you can kind of see on there. If I do it sideways, you can see all the lines down here. So that's just going to show up a lot more in a, if it's clear, it's going to be brighter. So I definitely do mountain streams or cleanish, clear, bluish waters would be good to use clear. Thanks for the question. So lures or baits, it all depends. Um, and we'll wrap it up with being a responsible angler too. So if you're going to keep the fish, I would use bait because they're going to swallow it, they're going to eat it, and then you're not going to really, honestly, be able to get that hook out of them. So if you're not keeping the fish, I highly recommend lures and flies. They're more fun. You're going to have more time. You're going to have more action because you're casting over and over again. Bait, you're going to drop it and leave it. And that's for catfish, bluegill, trout, all the community fishing type of scenarios. So it's a little bit more boring. If we're bait fishing, we usually all bring books and put the fishing pole in our chairs. And then that way they're kind of preoccupied, or we play I Spy and try to figure out what birds are floating on the water. By the way, these are all really good lures, and this is really good worms. And you don't need a whole worm when you are catching most fish. Catfish could probably handle a whole worm, but that's about it. And that'd have to be a pretty big catfish. So just given credit where I found the pictures, these bass lures are awesome. Bass being black bass or striped bass or walleye, anything like that, predatory bass, warm water species type fish, will go after a jointed bait like this, crankbaits, rattle trap, and then drawing a blank on what spinner baits. Sorry. And then for trout lures, we're going to have little jakes or spoons and rooster tails and crankbaits for them as well. But usually trout will eat trout. So especially brown trout are pretty predatory and aggressive. So you're going to go with a spotted version for them. And then this is a painted spoon as well that looks kind of like a trout. So here's some pictures of baits. I tried to find the least gross mealworm picture. They're just gross little creatures, but they are always found in the wood shavings. This is just a few of the power bait options. When we do say power bait, we do mean this, like the paste options, and then but they do make like worms and grubs, and I really like the little chartreuse grubs in the community ponds too. If you're going for trout or bluegill, you kind of can use them for both, and then that gives you more options too for catching. I put this San Juan worm up here because it is a fly, but if you put it below a bobber or if you put a little split shot up here, it'd be really great to fish with as well. And then these are technically more like a lure, but they are considered plastic baits. And these are plastic worms or creatures to go for bass. And you set them up as a Texas rig, a drop shot rig, or a Carolina rig. And all those are really great options. And it's just where you put the weight on the line compared to the plastic. And then it's really neat too, so that you don't get stuck in the weeds. You just barely put the hook in, you put it through and then back through. And as you put it back through, you just barely have the hook sticking out. And that way you don't catch on the weeds as much. All right, so most of us are not this lucky. So I just thought it's one of my favorite little cartoon things on here. There is that beginner's luck. And I brought up Chris Meyer's fish on the right because he had gone out there and was out there for 5 minutes and caught a almost 32-pound striped bass out of Willow Beach. So he took it to the marina and had them weigh and measure it. So it was pretty neat for the guys to get to see that at the store as well. But we're not always going to be that lucky. But we're going to practice so that we can get lucky. And we're also going to practice so we don't have these messes. Spinning reels are notorious for this. So are bait casters. These were two of my favorite pictures I found. So just get out and practice. Make sure your line matches your weight so that you don't overextend your line like that. Also, if you notice, there's a lot of line on here. And you can see it's like pushing up over the edge. This most of the time, unless you're like deep sea fishing, you don't need that much line on your reel. And that's also why you're going to have this nest. So honestly, I would only go half. You can even do like a Google Earth image and measure it and double check that you have that much line on your reel. But most of the time, you're not going to clear that fishing even Lake Mead. So these reels hold a lot of line. It'll even say it on there when you buy it. I recommend only half unless you're deep sea fishing. It'll definitely save you in the long run with the nests like that. Also keeping it really clean and out of the sun or the heat. So again, we can go fishing anywhere. If you say you don't have time to get out of the house, you still have time to play at your house. So you can buy this backyard bass game on the online, and it comes with a couple casting plugs, and you can just put them on your line and do like a loose knot loop. It's also good to know that knot and that loop for when you're using a jig, so that you have more motion with it as well. Also, you can put it on a swivel, a barrel swivel with like a clip, and then just clip it on and off and then switch it to a lure when you do go fishing. Most of the entry level fishing poles for kids or beginners also come with some sort of casting plug, and that way you can practice at home too. So there's lots of community fishing options. This is Floydland Park in the Northwest, and you can see the shadows and the shade. Like Michelle was talking about where the fish hiding, they're gonna hide in these shaded spots. So you could actually fish right here, cast right out to the light, and then bring it back in. And sometimes you'll have like the greatest luck. Lake Mead has the handicap fishing pier at the Hemingway Marina. It is a little smaller, but you are allowed to fish all along these edges. So there's some great plants that you can fish on the edges of too. That's where the fish are hiding. And this was someone that submitted their catch last summer to me. And you can also go to takemefishing.org, and they have the first catch certificates, but I will be more than willing to make a first catch certificate for someone if they catch one. So just let us know. But yeah, this was his first fish and it's a bluegill. Lots of opportunities to go fishing, and you really don't need a lot of time. You just need an hour, maybe 2 for drive time and setting up. So we do stock with trout and catfish. It all depends on the water temperatures. It all depends on uh, angler success. So if a lot of fish are coming out, we'll stock more often. If not a lot of fish are coming out, we won't stock as much. Um, Depending on how big the reservoir, park, or pond is how much we'll stock it. Also the budget. So depending on how, and it does take a couple years. So thanks to COVID, there was a lot of fishing supplies and boating supplies being bought. All of that helps fund stocking of trout and maintaining waters. So yeah, it's budgeted 2 to 4 years in advance, by the way. So it will take a couple more years to see the COVID bump on outdoor recreation. So we do stock trout from November, usually right around Thanksgiving, and then we stop around March, maybe into April. It all depends on the temperatures. So luckily it is still staying cool enough, so we should be able to get a couple more in. And then catfish get stocked in right at June for free fishing day usually, maybe May, the end of May if it's warm enough. And then we don't stock in June because it's just too hard to transport fish. And then we stop in September. And also during those warmer months, we do stock a few bluegill. So that's a lot of fun too. And they're reproducing really well at the ponds. So some of the small fish in there are little bluegill, so they're not allowed to be caught yet. If you do accidentally catch them, I highly recommend getting them back in there so they can get bigger.
All right, so all of these things are connected, and the ecosystems that we talked about earlier aren't completely separate from us in our homes, and we don't really want to mess with the natural habitat too much, whether that be in relation to our trash and pollution or the organisms themselves. So you guys can help out by supporting our new Don't Ditch a Fish program, through which we encourage people to not ditch their fish or other pets or plants. And a lot of people may think that they're setting their fish free, but it can actually grow to be super massive, like this one pictured here, and they can become invasive and cause problems for the whole habitat and ecosystem. And on top of all of that, it is actually illegal to release your fish. So really consider if a fish is right for you and your family before purchasing it. They can live for a pretty long time. The oldest recorded goldfish was 43 years old. And if you need to rehome your fish, try to look at other options like giving it to a pet shop, selling it to someone, donating it to a school or office, things like that. Because we all want healthy, abundant bodies of water so that we can keep fishing. Hold on to your fish. Don't let it get away like this guy.
Thank you, Michelle. There we go. So invasive species cause a lot of damage. One is to the fish's health. Sometimes they will actually, if they're hungry enough and the water's overpopulated, they will try to eat them. So like they'll try to eat the quagga mussels in Lake Mead, and then they feel full and they don't get enough nutrients from them. Also, there becomes competition for food sources. So then there isn't enough food for all the fish to go around. And the invasive species are named that because they usually take over the water, including their food source to the native species that should already be there. Sometimes, like in Cummins Lake, the pike will take over the native species by eating them and their offspring, the eggs before they're even hatched. And then they're such a predatory fish that they'll end up eating them. They're smaller versions of themselves, and they actually eat up everything in the entire water until there's a few large pike left, and then that's it. then there is no fishery. So it can be expensive if we accidentally spread the species. Um, Something like this is the water just got left, the propeller got left in the water and it had quagga mussels in it. And so this is like at the marina. And so then if it's not maintained, the quagga mussels just grow on top of each other and clog up motors, belges, intakes, water pipes, and stuff like that. And that's where it becomes expensive publicly as well. So then it becomes a federal issue when they take over border waters. So this is that Asian carp, the flying fish. And then it's really hard to fish a water like that when you have the danger of a fish smacking you in the face. So we want to make sure everything is clean before we leave an area. That includes fishing poles. And actually, before I actually forgot to add a picture of the moss that is going around right now. It is Imagination brand, and it's a little moss ball. And if you do want to grab it, be prepared to look for quagga mussels. It'll ruin your aquarium if they grow, because they grow on top of each other. They just got found the last few weeks all across the West. And actually, I talked to some other people, and it is across the nation. If it gets into our water supply, it can cause major, major damage for our water supply. So please be careful if you do have an aquarium, and if you know anybody that does and they're interested in that moss, not to buy it. The store should actually have taken it off the shelf already. So what we're also trying to protect are the endangered species that are getting pushed out of their homes. So we don't want to catch them. And if for some reason they do catch our bait, we want to put them right back in the water. All of these fish don't have any natural protection like spiny rays and dorsal fins. So they're easily predated. The predators go after them quite well. So we have a humpback chub, we have a patch-nosed chub, razorback sucker, and our other sucker fish. So we actually have something like 26 endangered species in the Southwest. And so we want to be really careful of that. And you can see how, and this is also due to water conditions and overpopulating certain areas. So we just want to be really careful that if we do see any endangered species, that we're taking out the invasives and protecting the others. And thank you, Michelle. She posted our Facebook post on the moss balls we're worried about. So one thing we all want to strive for is to be an ethical angler. We want to fish responsibly. And that means that we are respecting people nearby, we're respecting the outdoors, we're respecting our water, the land, and the angler nearby, so that these awesome little kids have somewhere to go and continue to fish, and that they can always get out, and that they have a nice clean water to go out to. So another thing to do is to only eat what you're going to actually, or sorry, to only keep what you're actually going to eat, and that's selective harvesting. Also, if you're not going to eat it at all, let them go, let them grow. And then if they're really small, let them get bigger so that you have something to catch later. So preserve your passion, protect all of our legacies, and spread the word. So take a kid fishing, find a friend to take fishing. So keep getting everybody outdoors. It's really good for our mental health too, right? So always be prepared when you go out. Have your fishing license. That helps having stocked fish, and also biologists to maintain those fisheries for you. Pack it in and pack it out. All of our washers go out to our fishable waters, so make sure that they are clean. If you do see a bunch of garbage at your favorite fishing spot, Plan to have another bag, and we'll keep spreading the word, and hopefully it'll just get better for all of us. Check your current weather conditions and where you're going. Make sure you don't get stuck on the way out there, either from floodwaters or from a bad water road conditions. A lot of our waters can get washed out really easily. I didn't even know we had a lot of rain, but it came down really quick this afternoon. So you can only imagine somewhere like Willow, where the road goes straight down to Willow Beach, that it could get washed out easily. So be very careful with the conditions and know what you're getting yourself into. We do also have the fishing report, which is listed down here. We update it every single week with the help of our biologists and our park rangers. And let us know if you have any questions beyond that. So any more questions, anything I didn't answer that you're curious about, let us know. There's probably something I forgot. Like I do actually have a practice hook. So I just make these with a little eyelet from the hardware store. And this is the corner of a hanger. So I just keep making them. And then you can practice your knots with them. And you can practice like a double uni knot so that you can practice your line to line connections. That's a big one, especially if you're going after big fish. But that'll be in the bass talk. So let us know as you leave. Thank you all for coming. We do have a survey as you exit, so please fill that out. Let us know how we did, what you'd like to see. We're here for you guys, and we're just happy you guys came along to watch tonight and support our programs. And there is my phone number and email if you have any questions. Thank you. Have a very good night.